Hey, what's up everybody? Thunderbob here, and tonight we're going to be taking a look at Diablo IV Vessel of Hatred. I want to do a review of the game. I know I'm super late to the party on this. I unfortunately did not get an early access code to the game, and then I had two hurricanes and some power loss and some issues. So I'm very late coming to this, but I have completed the campaign and I put countless hours into the endgame. I thought I would do a quick review of Vessel of Hatred. Now, I believe there are two kinds of players that come to the Diablo franchise. The ones here for the engaging story and the deep lore, and then the other group that largely ignore that completely and are just looking for that classic Diablo action RPG formula. Personally, I fall in the middle. I both love the story and have enjoyed nearly every piece of Diablo media in existence. I've played every game multiple times. I've read through the stories and the manuals. I have a ton of the books on my bookshelf. But I also really enjoy the gameplay and the mechanics of the game, and I love investing hours into perfecting my hero. So I'm going to come at this from two different angles. I'm going to look at this from a story and campaign perspective, and separately from a gameplay and endgame perspective. We're going to start with the story, which I gotta say I was kind of disappointed with. It starts off very strong with a really killer intro cinematic, which you can see right now in the background. And it introduces a really interesting new villain character right off the back in Uravar, a human who survived the descent into hell in the original Diablo IV campaign and has returned scarred and even more zealous, if that's possible. Unfortunately, he's pretty underutilized outside of the intro and is disposed of way too early. For much of the expansion, you're being hunted by Uravar and the Church, while also you're trying to track down Neyrella, who at the end of Diablo IV fled with Mephisto's Soul Stone, and it is slowly corrupting her. The first half of the campaign is pretty strong. You revisit a ton of locations from Diablo II, from the Cuirass Docks to the Durance of Hate, and even Travancore, or Travincal, depending on how you want to pronounce that. They tie in some interesting lore about Akarat and a new character named Iru, and help introduce the Spiritborn class throughout the campaign. It's really about the halfway mark when you finally meet up with Neyrella and she joins you for the rest of the expansion that it kind of falls apart for me. And I'm not one of those people who disliked her in the base game. I thought she was fine, if forgettable, but now they have her as the focal point of the entire story. It also really drags to a crawl at this point. You move forward a few paces and then she starts to get corrupted by the stone, and you fight some enemies while she whines and cries, and then you do this about a dozen more times. Now, there are a few cool set pieces here. One in particular where Iru parts the waters like Moses, and it's got this cool effect where the water's like rising out of the level. Overall, towards the end, I just wanted it to be over, and it wasn't even particularly long. I was just kind of done with the story they were telling. And then you finally reach the final battle, who they really set up, for a comeback of Mephisto and a fight against the Primeval again. It's the entire setup for the expansion, and then it never truly materializes. The ending is very disappointing, and it really soured me on the entire story. It really felt like a bait and switch in the end. And thinking back, there are so few meaningful bosses or interesting moments in the story compared not only to the base Diablo IV campaign, but also to previous expansions like Reaper of Souls or Lord of Destruction. Those expansions, the one-offs, had multiple interesting set pieces, bosses, and especially memorable endings. Those expansions felt like true endings and epilogues to the base games, rather than just setting up the next piece of content. To me, it feels like they want to do yearly or even more frequent expansions, and with the way the story was presented, it seems like they don't want to use up too much story content in a single expansion, or they simply cut this expansion in half and then padded certain sections to make it feel like a full priced expansion, and then the second half is going to be coming later. Now, this is in pretty sharp contrast to the gameplay, which I think is the best Diablo IV has ever felt. They've revamped nearly every system since the initial release of the game, which was in a pretty weak state. New item systems and ways to upgrade and improve your item, new skills, and a completely rebuilt Paragon system. So many newly added endgame activities that it can really feel overwhelming when you're first starting out. I always felt the moment-to-moment combat in the base Diablo IV was pretty good, but most of the systems around it felt weak. Now they've really optimized that combat while fixing nearly every one of those systems and the complaints I had with them at release. There have been a ton of improvements to the itemization of the game. You have so much more control over improving your gear as well through the tempering system, which lets you add 2 affixes to an item. And then as you reach the end game, you unlock Masterwork, which allows you to level up an item up to 12 times. Each level either grants a 5% boost to all affixes or a 25% boost to a single affix, and it gives you a good reason to try to re-roll and improve your item over and over again. The items that drop are also way more interesting in that release. They've done away with so many of the useless affixes. They've also added a good number of new unique and legendary powers to give you a ton of build variety and options. Another addition is the runes and rune words. These are very different from the implementation of Diablo 2. In Diablo 2, you essentially put runes in a predetermined pattern, and it would create a kind of like a unique item, but like a really overpowered unique item. And most endgame builds relied on very specific rune words, very rare runes that produce those rune words. Here, I feel like runes are quite a bit more common. It's very different. Here, you basically select 2 runes, and it'll give you a power. Like, if you look, I've got Gar here. So, when I spend 25% of my maximum mana, I gain 2.5% critical strike for 5 chances. For 5 seconds, up to 25% chance. Essentially, I have a 25% crit bonus here. And then my other one here, Neo Mott, will give me the Rogue Dark Shroud ability whenever I attack after not taking damage for a few seconds. So you basically got some of these that produce offering and some of these that cost offering. And it's largely a way to introduce skills and abilities from other classes, but also things like gaining resources, reducing cooldowns, yeah, just a ton of variety. And it's different. I don't know if it's necessarily better than the Diablo 2 rune words. I think those are very rigid, and those runes are almost always used in the same way, and you end up having just a couple of combinations that everyone uses. And it may end up being the same way here, but I feel like it gives you a lot of flexibility in that you can pick how you want to generate the offering and then how you want to spend it in pretty unique ways. Overall, I think the itemization is a huge improvement over the base Diablo 4, which just had way too many really boring affixes and made it really hard to build your character. There are a few minor complaints I've got. I still would love to see them add in set items, maybe in the next expansion. I also think that they drop too many uniques, especially from the Uber bosses, and too many of the same uniques. So the majority of the uniques in the game are class specific, and you only see uniques drop for the class you're currently playing. So in the end, you see these same, 10 to 15 unique items over and over and over again until it gets really meaningless and boring. I wish there was a small chance, even if maybe it was only like a 10% chance, to have drops from other classes, because part of the excitement, like in Diablo 2, would be you're playing and you get like an FSOJ, an Oculus, grandfather or something that makes you want to play another class. That's half the reason I would create alts back then, is because I would see some really cool item drop, and I'd have to make a character to use it. And then my other complaint is about the rarity of items. Not necessarily like uniques. I think uniques actually might drop too much when you start target farming them. Mythics are very rare, and maybe you could improve that a little bit. But it seems like a much better place than at release. My complaint is actually about legendary items. Ancestral legendary items in particular are very, very rare, and finding the powers on them on the higher end is exceedingly rare. Like if you go into your collections and you look at your codex, I've put a ton of time into the expansion, and you can see how few of these I have upgraded. Where there's some of these that literally I've never seen in the ancestral forms. I've got it says I've got 2 maxed. Like this one I got maxed somehow. So I'm at I'm reading this is kind of hard, but my understanding is the second number I have 2 out of 363 maxed. Is that right? That seems exceedingly low. Um, and this is after countless hours. So I think they could improve the drop rates of ancestrals, and particularly the legendary ancestrals. Like as you start getting into the endgame activities, you get more and more uniques to the point where literally on the Uber bosses they only drop unique items, and you never see any legendary items, and it makes it very hard to upgrade those legendary powers. Beyond the itemization, there's also a ton of class improvements. Every class received at least a new skill, some new items, new improvements. Obviously, the Spiritborn is completely new. The Spiritborn is clearly the most powerful class. It'll likely see some adjustments in the future, with some of the bugged builds literally doing trillions of damage. But beyond the overpoweredness, they're really just built so smartly. Skills and Paragon and items all synergize in really fun and unique ways, and it really allows you to customize your playstyle, something that they probably learned from years of working on the other classes. My hope is in the future that each class gets a pass to bring them in line with the, not necessarily with the power level of the Spiritborn, but with the flexibility that the way they're built allows. Leveling has also been really improved. At release, you had a cap of 100 with 50 base levels and then 50 Paragon levels. With Vessel of Hatred, there's now a level 60 base cap at you can attain really quickly. And then after 60, you start working through Paragon. There are 300 Paragon levels. Those levels are also now shared between all of your characters, making it much easier to start new characters, to create new alts. And the Paragon levels start out pretty quick. You level fast, I'd say, until like the 220, 230 range, and it gets slower and slower until it feels like Diablo 2, where you're trying to get from like 95 to 99, and it just slows down beyond belief. You're also now limited to 5 Paragon boards and 5 glyphs, which feels a little bit limiting, but I don't know, it makes it where you don't have to map out your build quite as much, and it makes it like you don't need to follow a guide as much as I felt like you needed to in the base game. And lastly, but probably most importantly, I want to talk about the end game of the Vessel of Hatred, which I think has been vastly improved over the base game. There are so many different activities you can do now, and I'm going to go quickly through all of those activities and give you a kind of a rundown on the end game. This is by no means a guide. You will probably need a written like chart to follow along if you're new to the game. So the end game really starts when you beat the campaign and you get into the Torment difficulties. You have to unlock these by beating certain points in the pit. I think it's 20, 40, 60, 65, something like that. I've done it all, and I've done almost every activity in Torment 4 at this point. The nice thing in Vessel of Hatred is Torment 1 is fairly easy, and you can get every item in the game in Torment 1. So the only benefit for going into the harder and harder difficulties is the improved gold and experience, and the increased legendary unique and mythic uniques. But the same items will drop in Torment 1 and Torment 4. So really you're usually best running the thing that you can do as quickly as possible, because typically kill speed trumps the improvement you get from the higher Torment difficulties. As you can see, it goes from 300, 400, 500, 600. If it takes you 10 minutes to do something in Torment 4, and it takes you 3 minutes to do it in Torment 3, Torment 3 is probably going to be more productive for you. That's just how it works. The next piece of the puzzle is Nightmare Dungeons. These will drop randomly in different endgame activities. You can also craft them. And they're basically a upgraded dungeon that scales to your current Torment difficulty. The main reason you go to the Nightmare Dungeons is for your glyph drops. They have a high rate of glyph drop. And also the material you need for masterworking drops from these Nightmare Dungeons. The next item I want to mention is the Infernal Hordes. These are very useful. You get these compasses through various endgame drops, And this is kind of like, it's almost like a rogue type game mode where you survive a wave of enemies, 60 seconds, and then it gives you three choices. These choices have negatives and positives for your run, and most of them will produce more of a resource you need, and at the end of the match, you can turn those resources in to get some huge uh, bonuses, either items, gold, or more of that masterworking resource. And I gotta say, sometimes these item pinata moments just go on forever. And that leads us to the pit, which is available in Karagar. There's this obelisk that you interact with, and it lets you pick a particular tier. Um, I'm up to 76 at the moment. And this is basically like a randomized two-stage dungeon. And at the end, you can upgrade your glyphs and you get some decent drops. And then also you get some obols, which allow you to gamble at the curiosity vendor. And then there are a bunch of world events also. Realm Walker is a new seasonal event. When you defeat him, he spawns a portal to his realm and will provide opals, which are a new item type that give you bonus experience, some additional item drops. Some of these are rune drops or gold drops, boss summoning materials. There's also still Legion events. There's Hell Tides, which will move from zone to zone. There's Whispers, which you come here to do your Whispers, which are these quests on the map. And these will give you pretty good experience and items as well. And you really want to try to like do all these things together. So if you see the Helltide going, you might go in and kill the Blood Maiden real quick, which will give you 5 Grim Favors. You might want to keep an eye out for the Realm Walker, and specifically if it spawns with Whisper on it, or if you're thinking about doing Ubers like Duriel here, and you can see right now if I did Duriel that I would get 5 Grim Favors, which when I get this bar filled up, I can turn it in for that Whisper cash. So these things kind of like all line up together where you try to overlap them and do as many of them at one time as possible. Another newly added endgame activity is the Undercity, and this you can open the portal whenever you want, and it's basically like a timed event. You have 120 seconds on the baseline version, and every time you kill or complete certain objectives, that timer goes up. There's also a bar that you're trying to fill up, and then you get these tributes, which allow you to kind of customize and target what you want to farm. So if you want runes, I would use that one. If you want to get boss summoning materials, legendaries, I had one for uniques or mythics. So you can select that, and then you can also bargain, which you can pay some additional resources and kind of guide what you're looking for. If there's a specific aspect that you're looking for, if there's, you want more weapons, more armor, more jewelry. You can also do chaotic uniques, which is one, maybe the only way in the game I know of to get uniques for other classes. You can also do that. So this is a pretty unique end game activity that I've really enjoyed. The other major end game activity is the Uber bosses, which there's a good number of them. I think 5 or 6 of them at this point. And what's nice now is you kill them, and once you're done, you can literally just click on their little cauldron and put in the resources you want and respawn that boss and fight it over and over again. You don't have to go back in and out of the dungeon over and over again. It really streamlines and makes fighting the Uber bosses that much easier. And then once the Uber boss dies, you get your uniques and you can reset it. Each Uber boss also has particular drops. So like you can look at the list and okay, I'm looking for a Rod of Kelpeki. I should fight Andariel to get the best chance of getting that item. So it's not like the old Diablo 2, Diablo 3 where uniques, I mean, they can drop anywhere in the game, but you have a much higher chance of getting these uniques from particular bosses. To the point where if you're looking for one particular, I would run that boss until you get the version you need. Yeah, so I think that's the majority of the main endgame activities. There's a lot of them. it's overwhelming to a new player, especially if you haven't played the last couple of seasons. I played pretty hardcore 1, 2, and 3, and then I skipped 4 and 5 because I didn't want to be burnt out before the expansion, and I was a little overwhelmed. They really need like a cheat sheet or a chart in the game. Like there is a little help area that kind of describes the activities, but doesn't tell you necessarily where to go, why to do them, what the drops are. You really need to go to a third party to get that kind of stuff. And you would benefit substantially from going to a place and finding out what bosses drop what items and where you get the masterworking material and how you get glyphs and how you'd upgrade them. All that stuff I feel like is explained a lot better in different guides out there. But I gotta say, once all this stuff comes together and clicks in your head, all the different activities, the rewards they provide, how long they take you, it is a really fun and rewarding endgame loop. And I think it might be my favorite Diablo endgame. Like, Diablo 2 is probably still my favorite game in the series. It's probably my favorite game of all time. But the variety and number of different ways that you can improve your character here is actually, I think, really amazing. And I think that's one reason why I've kind of got like this 2 review thing going on here. Because I really do think that the gameplay systems, the end game, the gameplay loop has been vastly improved over the base Diablo 4 release. But the inverse is also true of the story. I really liked the story, the world, and the atmosphere of the base game, following Lilith and the dynamic between her and Inarius, and the fine line of who the real villain was, and, just the dark atmosphere, everything in the base game I really liked of the story. But here in the expansion, I think that took a big step back with simplified storytelling, a really lackluster ending. So, like, if I was to rank Vessel of Hatred, I would give the campaign, like, a 6, maybe a 5. And if I rate the gameplay, I would give it, a 9. It's very close to perfect in my mind for a Diablo game. A few little nitpicks here and there, a few things to tweak. But overall, the gameplay and the systems, I think, have been really improved. Now, at release, I would have said the opposite. I would have said the campaign and those first 50 hours of the story, I would have given a 9, but it was the gameplay and the end game in particular that I think I had problems with, and I would have given it, a 5 or a 6. So it's kind of an interesting thing here. And my hope is that the next expansion, they can take what worked and what didn't work, really improve the story, finish this expansion, or introduce new villains, whatever they're going to do. But I think they need both of those things to be at a high bar to succeed. They need a really fantastic story, dark atmosphere, interesting characters, and then they also need the gameplay and the systems and everything to work for me. Like, I've still enjoyed my time with this. I would have enjoyed it immensely more if I really cared and was invested with the story that was being told here. So I'm going to end the video at that. Thanks for sticking with me. If you enjoyed this, I will probably do another couple of Diablo 4 videos, and I do a bunch of other non-Diablo related stuff, some virtual reality, some other new and old games. So if you want to check out anything, if you like what I'm doing, please like, subscribe, drop me a comment with any of your thoughts, and have a good night, everybody.